We'll now move to a very interesting session. I'm very pleased and honored to invite Nalini G Ramachandran. Um, a, a brief introduction about her. In the past 2 decades, Nalini G has worked as a writer and an editor across various media, film and television, newspapers and magazines, and children's books, graphic novels. She's taken a keen interest in Indian culture, especially the art and craft of storytelling. Very importantly, she is the author of Lore of the Land, Storytelling Traditions of India, Navadurga, Nine Forms of Goddess, Epitikalam, and many books. And today she's with us speaking about the book Lore of the Land. Once again, it is my honor and pleasure to invite Nalini G Ramachandran for her session. Over to Nalini Ji.
Thank you so much, Shivkumarji, and the entire Indica team. I'll quickly share my screen. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk about the book Lore of the Land. It was published in 2017 by Puffin Books, Penguin Random House India. But work on it honestly began way back in 2015, when all I had in mind were these 4 words: storytelling traditions of India. My initial research showed me that stories for children, especially traditional stories, um, were primarily divided into 4 genres or subgenres. First was folk tales and fairy tales. A lot of these were either retellings of what we've heard from the West, or in terms of Indian folk tales, they were divided into states. So you had folk tales from Bihar, folk tales from Tamil Nadu, and the like. And of course, there were, the animal stories, Panchatantra and Jataka tales, and all of those. The second category, of course, was mythology. In mythology, the focus was mostly on popular gods and goddesses. And then there were tales from the epics, Puranas, which of course focused on brave hearts and, epic heroes. Third were the heroes who used their wit and wisdom to overcome challenges or come up with, different kinds of solutions. So in those kind of stories, you had Nasruddin Hoja, you had Tenali Raman, and the like. And in recent times, what had happened was children's books were focusing on folk art, in the sense the stories were accompanied by illustrations that were taken from these art forms. So most of these, took inspiration from either Varli or Gond or West Bengal's Patachitra. And the books that focused on storytelling traditions for grown-ups were either written by academics or research scholars. Many of these happen to be non-Indians. So when I began thinking about writing a book for children on storytelling traditions, because there wasn't any as such at that time, I wanted to try and break a lot of these molds that had already been created, as far as traditional storytelling in publishing was concerned. So that brought me to a lot of questions, and I wanted the book to answer these questions in as capable a manner as possible. So first was, what is a story? When I began researching, I realized that there are a lot more types of stories that are lesser known, and which really need to be told, because otherwise children tend to believe that these are the only kind of stories that exist. So I wanted to bring in some new vocabulary as such to children's storytelling understanding of storytelling traditions. And when it came to storytelling traditions per se, I at that moment I came across around 300 traditions. I thought that was a huge number, but now when I'm thinking back, I think it's a very small number, because there are hundreds and hundreds more. Of course, I was able to put only 38 of those into the book, and a lot of thought went into what should be taken into the book and what should be left out, etc. So the kind of stories that the book focused on were primarily local legends. So what you see here is a bard who performs the Alha Khand, which is the story of two warrior brothers, Alha and Udal, from the Bundelkhand region. Now, something like this was important because it helped me tell readers about how stories are not just about being spoken or told, but they are also performance oriented. And here you can see that, the bard himself has dressed like a warrior, and he has the twirling mustache, and he has a sword in hand. And the whole epic poem is set to a meter called the Alha meter. And the community that actually narrates these stories is they belong to the Alhaite community. So, these nuances that communities in India actually get their names from storytelling traditions was important. So I thought we should include something like that. I wanted to focus on regional mythologies. Like I said, a lot of popular stories keep getting told and retold. Of course, they are popular for a reason, but somewhere there are these lesser known gods and goddesses who then tend to stay within a particular geography or boundary, and their stories don't really get outside those geographies. So here you see Manasa Devi, the snake goddess, and in the book you will find Sukanani Ojapali, which is a form of choral singing with hand mudras, and that particular tradition focuses only on the story of Manasa Devi. Um, Lesser known characters, again from history, folklore, mythology, all of it. Here you see Vetakarumagan. He is the son of Shiva and Parvati when they had come to Earth in the form of a hunting couple, a hunter and huntress couple. And the story of Vetakarumagan is quite popular again, in Kerala mural art form. And again, if I hadn't included it, again, the story of such a character would not have been told. And his story is interesting because, it talks about how he uses weapons initially for aggression and violence, and then there is again, that is the story. But so he then uses, and he understands that weapons can be used to protect as well, and then he becomes the protector of the forest. So these were the nuances that I wanted to touch upon. Most importantly, I wanted the art of the book to be as authentic as possible. So if we were talking about the tree of life or Kalpavriksha from the Madhubani art style, the whole illustration had to look exactly like that, or as close, as possible to the original artworks. So we tried to keep the color palettes extremely similar. There are hatching techniques and a lot of other, minute details that we have tried to include: the borders, the frame, where the fish are placed when it comes to a drawing like that in Madhubani. All of these details we have given importance to. So now all these, while I knew that, these were the kind of stories I wanted to include, it became important to understand how to put this whole book together. And that is how, I mean, if it's a book on storytelling traditions, it might as well have a story as the framework, because if I'm not going to tell it in the form of a story, children are not going to be interested. If it's going to be like a textbook, it would be anything like anything that the others had already written, like a compilation or an encyclopedia or a reference book. In that sense, it is all of this, but it also has a story at its core. And that is the story of Mohini. She comes from a family of storytellers, but she does not like telling stories at all because she does not know how to tell stories. And she meets this spirit called Katha. So as you can see, there is this similarity between Aladdin and Genie kind of, equation happening between both of them. And a lot of thought went into the writing as well, because structurally they travel from Andaman and end their journey at West Bengal. So that was in alphabetical order to make things easy for me. But within each chapter, there are, so it focuses on one particular tradition from that particular state or union territory. And there is the story of how that storytelling tradition came to be. And a story that is told in that tradition is also included. So there are these layers, the whole story within story format. A lot of the tropes that you will find in traditional storytelling are actually there in the book. So structurally also, if actually the chapter headings are idioms. So that's a way of saying that idioms can tell stories too. So, a lot of these small, small details I had, given importance to. And structurally too, if whoever has read the book would know that there is a particular point where the structure seems very similar to Betal Pachisi. So a lot of these aspects have been kept in mind. And again, selection also depended on the purpose of storytelling. So the purpose of storytelling, again, storytelling has been the oldest form of communication, teaching, because that's how, things have been passed on from generation to generation. But is it just that, or is there something more that children had to understand? Because sometimes, we don't realize these things until and unless it is told to us in an interesting fashion. So I focused on how belief systems, what we believe in, our culture, the rituals, why we do certain things, why we pray in a particular fashion, or so all of those had to be, included in the book. So for belief systems, for example, I have taken Marathi Kirtan, and as you all know, it was a big part of the Bhakti movement in its time. Um, Ways of living, so the cloth we wear or the jewelry we wear, where does it come from, what are the stories that the fabric or all these different things tell us, ways of living, why we eat something. Here you see a lady from the Sumi Naga tribe of Nagaland, and they have a song called Ayakuzule, which is the song of making cloth from cotton. And it's the story of their cloth, because it also talks about their head hunting past, the symbols that are woven into it, and all of those things. So it was important to tell children about these tribes and their ways of living, because India is such a diverse country, and the cultural influences are way too many. So we might think of it geographically in terms of states or union territories, but again, like I said, the influences extend way beyond. So I had to include Siddhi Goma or Siddhi Dhamal, which is the dance of the Siddhi people who came or were forced to come to India, an African tribe who were forced to come to India in the 600s and 700s. But now they are Indians. And so Siddhi Dhamal is a part of Indian storytelling traditions, So it was important to tell children and readers that you'll have to open up your minds, there are newer perspectives, and you'll have to include, it was about inclusivity, not leaving out certain communities in that sense. So all those aspects had to be touched upon. And again, like we know, storytelling has been extremely important when it came to social messages. People have used stories to as a form of protest, to talk about inequalities, injustices, and social messages in terms of gender roles. So here you see Dastan Goy. And as you can see, a lot of these storytelling traditions were initially male dominated, but these days you have women storytellers as well. And here you can see a woman, Dastango. So again, all of these also spoke about the importance of the connection between storytelling and languages. So that was another key aspect. And all these things together became the lore of the land. And that is how the book came to be titled Lore of the Land, Storytelling Traditions of India. Now, while I had all of these, things in place about the purpose and the kind of stories, it was important to also focus on the creative aspect of storytelling, because there were just so many different ways, and it was not just oral storytelling or just painting. There were these mixed forms where there is dance drama, then there was monologue, or then there was disguise. So a lot of these forms were very different. So the image that you see here belongs to a rare form of box puppetry called Chador Bador, and it's practiced by very few Santhal people today. So I didn't find enough information while researching. I had two options. Either I could have left it out and said I didn't find much about it, or I could have included it and said, okay, this is what I know. And if any of you can add to it later, that would be great. So I chose the second option, obviously, because, if this is something that is near extinction, it might as well be preserved in any way possible. So it's a very interesting form because the puppeteer tugs at a single string which is connected to a group of wooden puppets, and there are multiple things that happen at the same time. So the male puppets beat the drums, and the female puppets dance, and the circular stage rotates, and all of this happens at the tug of a single string by the puppeteer. So it's a very interesting form. Unfortunately, if nobody's going to practice it anymore, it's going to be a part of history. So it was important to tell children that, there are stories in all kinds of places and all kinds of forms. And sometimes it is extremely, you might not think that this is a storytelling tradition, but actually it is. And that is where nature and wildlife came in. So it spoke about, this is the sacred grove from Meghalaya. India has a lot of sacred groves, and each grove has its own story and storytelling tradition. So it was important to tell children and readers that just geography by its mere existence can also be a storytelling tradition. So, you didn't really have to have a performance or, like an active part being played, but something by its mere existence was also a storytelling tradition, like these groves and forests and a lot of other things. Um, Secondly, it was important again to tell readers that while there is a particular storytelling tradition, it is made up of mini storytelling traditions within it. So here you can see the charm dance of Tibetan Buddhist monks. So while charm by itself has its own, backstory, the creation of the mask, the colors that are used, the motifs that you can see on the mask, or on their the silk brocade, the embroidery, all of it, those symbolic parts, each and everything is a story by itself. And again, everyday objects, so it was important for children to also think that playthings, something that a lot of us have spent our childhood with, playthings are also storytelling traditions. So right from the time of Indus Valley civilization, we've had toys, tell us about scientific theories, mathematical principles. And at the same time, dolls and toys in India, actually world over, have told us the story of several communities, the attire they wear, and maybe the musical instruments they play. And it's just very interesting that something like this would have so much symbolism or meaning to it. Most importantly, again, it was the focus of the book was also to tell children that there are unlikely connections around us, and we should be able to see them. Now, for example, in Lakshadweep, in Kiltan Island, there are women from a particular community who sing to the wind, because the men folk of their community are fishermen. So they sing to the wind so that the boat in which the men are traveling is safe, and the wind is gentle and steady on the sails of these boats. So it goes into the sea once they're done fishing, and they come back home safely. So this itself is a storytelling tradition called Katuvili, where they're singing a prayer to the wind. Unfortunately, because in recent times, the community has moved on to using mechanized boats, there is no need whatsoever now to sing to the wind because there are no sails on the boats. Now, who would have really thought that moving from a traditional boat to a mechanized boat would actually endanger or make an entire storytelling tradition extinct? So these were the connections that I wanted to focus on through the book. uh, And in all this, of course, the role of the storyteller is extremely important. So what you see here is Varli, one of the most ancient forms of storytelling. Now, all of us know Varli as, mere art that we see on coasters or dupattas or saris, but no one really realized that, the tribe has its own Varli mythology, and they have their own stories. And that is what the paintings, even if they look just like stick figures, that is what they are, meant to signify. So the role of the storyteller became very important, and that made the journey of Mohini through the book extremely, significant. And so there are things that, she learns on the way, that stories have to be learned and told, because that's the only way they will be passed on, and that's the only way stories will live on. Documentation, the whole point of the book was to document and preserve as many traditions as possible. And what you see here is a very interesting image from Patachitra, West Bengal's Patachitra. Now, their biggest, rivals, if you can call them that, are, media persons and television and film, etc. Because nobody really focuses that much on storytelling traditions anymore. So they've kind of been moved out of the tradition because of these new mediums. And here they have documented that. So they are documenting their own story, because the story of tsunami, it's this image is from that, and it talks about how, the television crew was able to telecast the devastation of the tsunami live, but the Patuas themselves could do it much later through Patachitra, only once things went back to normal. The third aspect that I have touched upon in the book is the story school. So a lot of revivalists are doing this now. I've heard of, theater schools coming up, where they teach everything from ideation to the whole production phase to presentation, expression of ideas. So, these are the things that Mohini finds throughout her journey, and through Mohini, the readers would find. So, the main point of the book is to say that you too can be a storyteller. And as you can see, right from the beginning in the illustrations, Mohini was outside of the storytelling tradition by itself, but as the story moves forward, she finds her place inside the tradition, and she has become a part of it. So, that's the message that she finds, that you too can be a storyteller. So there are a lot of other nuances in the book, and that focuses on, stories, storytellers, storytelling, because eventually it is the storytellers who made lore of the land, the storytelling traditions of India. So a lot of other nuances, but I could focus on just this brief snapshot of what went into the making of this book. Of course, if there are any questions and if we have the time, I'll be happy to answer. Otherwise, you can write to me. But thank you for listening. It has been a great experience. Thank you.
Fantastic, Nalini ji. I think, we began in my welcome address, I said that this is the story of the civilization of stories. And I think I was just experiencing it as you were narrating. It was equal to the experience of reading a book. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And I'm sure our audience has some questions for you. We have time. We can take a couple of questions.
Okay. Um, yes. So someone has asked me, Patachitra is from Odisha, right? Yeah. So there are two kinds of Patachitra. One is from Odisha. It is related to the story of Jagannath. And from the one from West Bengal is also called Patachitra. It basically comes from the medium, which is pat. The cloth is the canvas on which they create the stories. In West Bengal's Patachitra, it's actually a scroll storytelling tradition. So they actually unfurl the scroll on which they have painted images. It's somewhat like an ancient comic book of those days, and they sing these stories. Yeah. 1 second. inspiration to embark on this journey is basically, it's the same. Everybody talks about storytelling and storytelling traditions, but not many people know what all it involves. So it was just an attempt to discover, and it's just that the journey of discovery translated into this book. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nalini.
Thank you so much, Shivkumarji.
I'm sure our audience will read the book. I'm personally, I'm very eager to complete the book which I've started.
Thank you.